Sid Vicious, whose real name is John Simon Ritchie, was arraigned today on charges of murder. He said he felt sick. His manager was told bailing him out pending trial would be extremely difficult. He's an alien, he's not employed, and he's given to violent outbursts of temper. But his manager said, and I quote, "Underneath that tough exterior, there was a real nice guy."
Yes, I've been without, been down and out on a limb with nowhere to go. Told it's one less thing on my mind. Not to worry about all the paying out, the piles of bills and final demands. They'd all be sorted when I die. But I was going off the rails, no matter how I tried. And while those rails failed, I'm proud of me just died.
Sid Vicious will not have to stand trial for the murder of a girlfriend at the Chelsea Hotel. Sid is no longer vicious, he's dead. His nude body found in a Greenwich Village apartment, spoon and syringe nearby.
Then my luck came in, I got a lucky win. Hundreds of thousands, thousands of friends. Had no more worries for a time.
Yesterday, police found him there in room 100, and on the bathroom floor, they found the 20-year-old American girl he'd lived with for 2 years.
With you when you die. I was back on happy trails. I didn't have to try the way.
Sid Vicious was awaiting trial for the murder of his girlfriend, Nancy Spungen. It was a murder so horrific in detail, only a very sick mind could have lived with the reality. The police had no doubt about the murderer. We have the figurative smoking gun, they said.
It's a complicated day. Busy people on
I've always felt that Sid did kill Nancy.
Sid thought he did it. He actually confessed to Joe Stevens that he thought he did it.
The last time I saw them, Sid's got this knife about yay long, and he's sort of sticking Nancy with it, just gently, but she's like, "Ow, Sid, that hurts." So I was like, "Sid, be careful, someone's gonna get hurt."
I think he did it in a moment of madness.
Which Sid obviously wouldn't remember because of what he was on.
Sick city sometimes. Sick city in your mind. Sick city sometimes. Sick city way behind.
If you've ever been a heroin addict and lived with a girlfriend that was also a heroin addict, it's hard, I think, for most people to understand the dynamic unless they've lived it. It doesn't matter how much you love somebody. That all goes out the window when there's drugs involved.
I'm going to be very honest here. I was sucked into the heroin thing myself.
Sick city sometimes. Sick city in your mind. Sick city sometimes.
Probably more fighting would go on between a couple because someone had gone out to go around someone's house and copped and then creamed off a bit on the way home for themselves.
If there's one bag, and you both need that one bag to get straight because you're sick, somebody could get hurt.
You get sneaky. It's the one you love, but you love them to bits, but you'll still steal their drugs. This did go on with Sid and Nancy.
And both young and narcotics were involved. A lethal combination.
What he was on, he could easily have said, "Well, you boink," it really could have happened that way.
Sick city sometimes. Sick city in your mind. Sick city sometimes.
They were both in a nod, but having been in a few myself, I'd say he had one of them. And it was just a bit worse than usual.
He wasn't aware of what happening, woke up and she was dead.
This is like a nightmare. This is like right out of a Twilight Zone episode. You wake up, there's a knife, a pool of blood, and your girlfriend's in the bathroom, stabbed to death. Well, anybody's going to think that, what did I do last night?
It was too easy just to blame Sid in the beginning and not follow the case up. I mean, it's amazing when we think back now that the case wasn't followed up more so. And, everybody just assumed that he was guilty.
Police didn't give a fuck. When he died, they went, "Oh, that's tidy." Boom. Who gives a fuck? About two junkies that just killed themselves, and who gives a fuck?
One thing I know for sure is he certainly didn't do it. Sid would never have done that. And I know that in my heart of hearts.
Lying on the floor, dreams in your head. Is there any more reasons to be dead? When I lie in bed.
In the evidence photos, there's a large TV about 2 feet in front of the door, which may or may not impede entrance. There are mattresses around the room for at least 3 people. There's a very clear bloodstained handprint on one of them, and yet in the police file there is no mention of this. And for the record, the bed that Sid was passed out on isn't the one with the handprint. According to the police evidence file, there were only 4 of Sid's fingerprints in the entire room. Nancy was stabbed once in the abdomen, and it took her around 3 hours to pass out and bleed to death, which means that after she was stabbed, she would have been capable of getting to the room door and screaming for help. So why did she decide to make her way to the bathroom, to certain death? In all the NYPD police reports and statements, the murder weapon, the Jaguar K11 hunting knife, is left on top of an open suitcase next to the door, wiped clean of any fingerprints or traces of blood.
Detective Kilroy was one of the arresting officers when Sid was arrested. I think was never convinced it was more than just some mad junkie murder. As far as he was concerned, it was a smoking gun case. He'd walked in, he'd found his killer. Sid had guilty man written all over him, even though they had to slap him around and get him something like conscious to read him his rights.
In the police report, there is an account of Sid's response to questioning on the scene. It's full of contradictions. First, he states he didn't know what happened to Nancy, claiming he didn't stab her. Sid also claims that he took Tuinal and slept the night through. He then confesses to the murder, saying they had an argument. Finally, he tells police it must have been an accident. Sid also explains to the police that when he initially found Nancy in the bathroom, she was still breathing. And after washing blood from her, he went to the clinic to get her methadone. He called the police on his return.
Sid was oblivious to it all. I mean, he even got up in the morning and went to the methadone clinic.
That had to be in the early morning. I think the methadone clinic opens at 6 or something like that.
Got his methadone and came back before he realized that she was dead. That's how sort of far removed he was.
Malcolm was there. His mother was there. And he got bailed.
Pretty soon after he got bailed out, I remember seeing him down in Max's, Kansas City, that particular night that he actually got out. And it was a lot of back slapping and nice to see you, Sid, and all this from everybody. Obviously, from the way he acted over those days and him getting into trouble again, he obviously wasn't in a good state.
What would you like to happen now?
I'd like to have fun.
What sort of fun?
Any kind of fun, just fun. That's my object in life.
Are you having fun at the moment?
Are you kidding? Oh, I'm not having fun at all.
Where would you like to be?
Under the ground.
Are you serious?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it was, silly just to let him out on the streets. And, where's he going to go? He's going to go looking for drugs. He's going to, go to nightclubs and hang out, places where people are just going to encourage him to get into more trouble.
Yeah, we decided to go out. Sid wanted to go out. I mean, it was we had to get out. He was stir crazy. So we started to go hurrahs.
I mean, it was empty and there was a band playing really, really loud.
There's a scuffle to my right, and I'm like, what's going on?
Sid, out of nowhere, I mean, completely out of context with everything, smashes a glass in this guy's face.
There's glass flying, and Peter's going, oh, fuck.
I grab him and we drag him out.
And we're just running. And we're running out into the street. I mean, and there's people chasing us, screaming, shouting. I'm like, what? What the fuck happened? Oh, yeah, Sid just put a fucking glass in We didn't know who it was. Patti Smith's brother, of course.
From what people told me, I know Patti Smith's brother was a buffoon and probably deserved anything that happened to him.
That guy was just some drunk moron who, you know, was the straw that broke the camel's back, I think.
It's stupid, but it's a 21-year-old crazy boy does something and he goes back to jail. He didn't think about that end of it.
So much for protecting Sid. But he was like that. It could go off at any moment around him. That was the thing. It was a little bit, you were always like, oh, let's go out. All right, what's going to happen now?
Sid Vicious is in a detention cell at the Manhattan Criminal Court building, waiting for friends to post $50,000 bail.
Sid was due in court on the 1st of February. And a really good lawyer had been hired by now, James Merberg, at the expense of Virgin Records in a deal that Malcolm had done for an album they were going to record. What no one understood is just how good Merberg was. The assumption at Glitterbest Management Office was that it would take at least until the 3rd or 4th of February to get Sid released on the new bail that Virgin had posted for him. Merberg goes in there in the morning on the 1st, and by lunchtime it's all wrapped up and done and dusted, and so Sid is released into the waiting arms of his mother, Anne Beverly, and his new girlfriend, Michelle Robson.
I had known Michelle Robinson since long before Sid. She was around in the days when I was working with David Bowie, even.
She had a big fixation on Sid for a long time, and she knew Nancy from before Nancy went to England.
The new girlfriend, you know, that was quick. So, very quickly, that one. But, you know, he needed somebody. He needed that sort of emotional prop.
And she fit the bill.
She was a little bit like the old brand of groupie. She always dressed kind of, in those days, kind of in a semi-S&M kind of way. A lot of leather, a lot of high heels, a lot of hair, huge amounts of makeup. She was very glamorous, and she had a very, very aggressive personality.
And Sid was like the prize. No matter what condition, he was Sid Vicious. He was the trophy, and they wanted him.
Ultimately, if he would have, you know, not met his untimely demise, that was a good situation for him. It really was.
We thought he was getting out that day, and we were going to wait and see if he was getting out and then have a party.
I'd gone down to the courthouse with Terry Ork. Somebody comes up to me, he goes, oh, you're Peter, da-da. He goes, I didn't recognize the person. He goes, oh, he says, your friend's going to be getting out in a minute. You know, referring to Sid. So he says, if you go downstairs, you know, he should be coming out in the next half hour. I think I bumped into his mother next, and within sort of like 5-10 minutes, there was Sid. After that, then we're out the door. We're out the back door of the courthouse, onto the streets.
During interviews with Sid's mother for my book, she made it plainly obvious that both herself and Malcolm had talked to him regarding a possible future, but he seemed to be stuck in a mantra regarding joining his Nancy.
So, you know, like any junkie, you know, you wanted to get high, you know what I mean? That's your first thought always, and what a great time to get high when you're clean.
I think his mother had picked up some drugs for Sid, and Sid's like, oh, have you got them? You got them? And anyway, they go to the hotel, you go to this place where Anne's staying, and he does the drugs, and of course they're absolute rubbish. At this point, you know, Sid had asked me, he says, oh, can you get me anything? Can you get me anything? And I'm sort of in a bit of two minds about what to do. So anyway, I said, I'll see what I can do. I had other things I had to do that day.
And I was, at that point, living with two French hookers who were actually heroin dealers. This was up on 15th Street. But he came over with Peter, looking to score. And after the fiasco at Haraz with the glass in the eye thing, and, you know, my whole thing, we knew he was coming over. It was like we talked, there was a whole bunch. It was like, let's not sell him anything.
Through the usual channels where knew people were probably dealing in it, nobody really wanted to get involved.
We had some shit, but we decided not to give him any. So we came over looking for that, and we said, no, so listen, we're looking for ourselves, I don't think we did a very convincing job, because I could tell he hung his head, went, all right, guys, and left. And that was the last time I saw him alive. At the time, I felt like I was doing him a favor. But now I wish I'd say, no, come on, see, we'll do it with us. And now I feel like I made a mistake there.
And that's when Peter was dispatched by Anne with Anne's money to go and get some more drugs for Sid.
Somehow I got in touch with this woman who I didn't know at all, and somebody had given me her as a contact. I went down to see her, and I got what I'd been asked to pick up.
The things what did come back with Peter was beyond good. It was, I think it's been said it was 98% proof or something, which is too pure for the human body in any state, basically.
About two days later, I tried to get in touch with this woman again, and this woman had disappeared. She was no longer at the place where I'd met her, at the apartment I'd met her, and was nowhere to be found, really. I never saw her again.
Oh my God. Oh my.
Donna Florio lived just across the hall from the apartment in which the singer died. But she would not say whether she was among the 8 people who attended last night's party for Sid Vicious.
I was invited to that party, which wasn't really a party, it was just a few people. There wasn't even that many people.
Michelle asked if I could get heroin. And I was like, I'm not a dealer. No, I don't know. Well, you're invited anyway, come, Sid's out and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And I said, nah, too exhausting for me.
It was me and, my best friend then was Jerry Only from the Misfits. And Eileen, the 3 of us. And then just Michelle and Anne and Sid, and that was it.
So who was in that flat when you got back?
Just Sid's mother, Sid, and Michelle. And I went to the apartment probably at about, I would say, no earlier than about 7 o'clock, no later than about 8:30.
Well, no one came in. They came by, to make deliveries, but they didn't come in. I don't know what they said, but...
I was there until about 1:32 in the morning.
And none of us had ever mentioned Peter Kodak's name. I'd always left that out because I didn't know where he is or what trouble he was in, and I didn't want to make his life miserable, and just in case,
29 3/4 years later, back to 63 Bank Street.
Weirdsville. I remember it a little differently. I thought this was... I think the living room came more up to here, maybe. The living room was right up next to the kitchen.
It was like a small, what do you call them? You call them probably like bedsits. Apartment in New York.
And there was a couch going along here, and nothing here. Because I remember when those guys came to the door, you could see them from sitting here, And
there was, or maybe what you call a front room with a kitchen in it, and a bathroom. That was it.
Wow. This is the same. Wow.
I mean, you basically, small bedroom, where she had a bed where her and Sid were lying.
Very, very weird. I mean, it's so similar because it's really dark. And I remember it being really dark. And this is all very, very similar.
But police say they were told by the victim's girlfriend that his last hours were spent looking towards the future.
He was just in really amazing spirits.
We were laughing at certain things. Malcolm had sent him a list of the songs that he wanted him to do for the album. There was the ones that the Clash ended up doing, like I Fought the Law won. And I remember one that was on there was YMCA, which we thought sort of highly unusual and a bit amusing. And we were going through the list laughing at that.
I was really happy to see everybody and talking, and we were listening to New York Dolls records, and he was jumping around playing air guitar and being funny and telling jokes, and it was really an incredible thing for me to see the real side of him.
I think he was talking about going upstate, clearing his name up, doing this record, and he had a lot on his shoulders, but it was pretty positive.
Another distinction you have is being the other person who did the same stuff the night that he OD'd.
Yeah, that's true. And
did that come from a regular?
I OD'd that night also.
Did that come from your regular dealer?
No, it was a friend of ours that flew in from England. As soon as I shot this dope, man, it was fucking strong. I knew it as soon as I shot it. I walked out of the bathroom. I said, I think this is it, And Sheila just said, I heard Sheila going, don't die in my apartment. I said, shut the fuck up. And then next thing I knew, it was 4 hours later. I wouldn't say it was his fault.
He told you it was strong.
Yes, he did.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't hold the gun to my head. I took it with a smile on my face.
About 12 o'clock, Sid Vicious shot up some heroin, and he had a reaction to it, which he came out of about 45 minutes later. And then about 2 o'clock, he lay down to go to sleep.
He'd taken too much. He sort of passed out. We revived him, and then it was a good few hours I was there after, and by the time I left, he was okay.
I remember that it became a real bummer, and we left for a while.
Sid had asked me if there's any more, and I told him, no, there's not any left. I said, it's all gone. You've done it all. And what was left, I gave to his mother, and I told her, no way, give him any more of this tonight. Give him this tomorrow.
The significance of detoxification is that if a drug user is detoxified and uses the same dose he was used to, it can be lethal. So the detoxification program takes the drug user off the drug, but it also removes whatever tolerance or immunity he has to the drugs.
So the phone rang. It was Pam Brown. And she asked me if I saw the news. I said, no, I didn't see very much. And she said, Sid died. And, I knew it was the same dope, and then I found out it definitely was.
My first reaction was hot shot.
Well, they got a batch that I think was particularly good.
The stories now I'm told are that the heroin was just too pure, but then that was also a very common way of hot-shotting someone.
All I know for now is that he'd been asleep with companion Michelle Robinson at the time of his death. She's an unemployed actress who was hustled away from the scene along with the victim's mother.
And the whole idea that his mother gave him something, I don't believe that. I don't believe that.
The only people who can say the God's honest truth about what went on in Bank Street that night, one is Sid, and he's dead. One is Anne, and she's dead. And one is Michelle, and she doesn't even answer that name anymore. Whether he took more, whether there were other things like pills involved, God alone knows. But having overdosed once that night, he OD'd finally somewhere in the night, and the next morning, Sid Vicious was dead.
I was here once for 6 or 7 hours ever in my life 30 years ago with this thing that happened here that impacted my entire life. I could never touch it. You know what I mean? And now I'm standing in it, so it's just really, really, really odd.
A day after Sid's death, his mother, Anne Beverly, found this note in the pocket of her son's jeans. It seems to point to a death pact between Sid and Nancy, which apparently had existed since the previous summer.
It's meant to happen. Nancy always said she'd die before she was 21.
I think I was what there's now called a self-harmer, and in them days it's called stupid. But I think it was an inspiration to Sid as well, and of course he had to do it bigger and better and went further.
The last major British magazine interview the pair of them did, which was a record mirror, That was March, April 78. They were already telling people they got a suicide pact. Nancy, by all accounts, had been telling people before she even came to England that she'd never make 21.
There was always a sort of a fairness, a sort of an acceptance that, you know, live fast, die young, and he wasn't going to see very much old age.
She definitely had, like, that thing. I think she just brought him into it, like death wish.
I remember going in the kitchen one day, Nancy was there with her hand over a bowl. She cut her wrist, eating an ice cream. And I'm going, oh, hello, Nancy, what are you doing? She, oh, Sid doesn't love me anymore. Oh, right, okay, I'll come back, I'm just going to put the kettle on. You know, and it was just total play acting.
The philosophical answer, and probably the only answer I could give you with any authority, is Nancy killed Nancy.
I kind of feel like the most logical conclusion to me is that she just did it herself as some kind of, you know, because that's what people, you know, like that do, you know, like teenagers who cut themselves, you know.
And I lost a friend, a person that I'd known for a long time. Drug addiction's a disease. It's like being mad at somebody for having cancer. You know, it's like, it's a disease.
With the death of Sid Vicious, NYPD closed the case, believing he was the murderer. No further investigation has ever taken place.
But the police all treated this like, who cares? It's just another dead junkie, you know? We got better things to do with our time.
And this guy's name was Vicious. You know, he was supposedly violent. You know, of course he killed his girlfriend. They never thought twice about it.
Nobody ever followed up on it. It's like Sid got out, Sid OD'd, and end of story. Is that really what happened? Is that just, you know, we might as well just leave it at that. Who cares?
Anne Beverley was a character. Anne Beverley was very bohemian. I first was introduced to her in 1984, and we talked about doing a book about her son, and then Alex Cox's movie came along, Sid and Nancy, which played two significant roles. It postponed the book for about 3 or 4 years, and it allowed me and Anne to get closer and for her to tell me an awful lot more about Sid.
The fact that Sid's mother killed herself the same year that the Sex Pistols reformed is probably a coincidence.
You know, we all woke up one morning and we had a letter in the post. David Ross, Sid's cousin, had a letter that had a check-in for 10 grand to organise a funeral.
Whether she was carrying some kind of guilt over the years regarding her role in his death or not is very debatable.
And my letter basically was very down and did not say anything final, didn't say she'd done what she'd done, but was very, very down. And then at the bottom end of it kind of said to me, do me a favour and make sure that one day the world knows that whatever else my son was, he was not a murderer.
Out in the streets, it's down to who to meet. It's a jungle. I'm on a fast track to hell.
So this is the house where Nancy grew up, behind me. As you can see, it's quite a lovely place, which is a bit of a big difference between the Drury Lane flat where Sid and his mother spent their early years together. There was only cold water there and no warm. They're poles apart, and yet they're linked forever.
Nancy in Philadelphia was an upper middle class Jewish rock and roll fanatic.
He had that thing. He was charming, witty. He was full of wonder. People really were in tune with him, and he had charisma for days and days and days.
She was one of the super groupies of Philadelphia at that time, and they were the people who knew Aerosmith and stuff like that. And could get you backstage.
I just genuinely liked him. I mean, there was just something about John. Nothing pretentious. I mean, he would not have been one of my friends if it had been the case. I mean, there were a lot of punk hangers-on that I really didn't give, tosses about, to be honest with you. I didn't really hang out with him at all.
Sid was really clever. He had a great brain, and the way he wore Nazi insignia and swastikas was completely to dilute the meaning of it, and people never got that about him, that he was clever and he understood concepts.
Well, I'm not stupid, and this is the way I fool people. I act like a complete dummy, Sid Vicious, duh. But in actual fact, they underestimate me so much that they find out that I fooled them completely.
When I first met John Beverley, yes, I could see him living a long and full life. When Beverley became vicious, you knew that he was not going to make 22.
And I went to this audition, and we were all sitting in the stalls, waiting for stuff to happen. And Sid and Nancy entered. So it was a real stir, naturally. I said, oh, Sid and Nancy. And then Sid at one point turned round and said, why don't you lot all fuck off? And one of the auditioners said, bollocks. Well, as you would. And suddenly went into a fury. He said, what are you saying, bollocks to me? And he got out of his stupor and charged back and started laying into this bloke. So there was this bloke, being attacked by presumably his hero, trying to fend him off, Look, about half an hour later, him and this bloke were sitting next to each other, chatting quite friendly. And Sid said, yeah, I think it's a good way to make friends by having a fight. And, they were the best of buddies by then.
When Sid and I used to hang out and we used to go out in the evenings, we often ended up in physical trouble, in fights. I mean, and that was before even he was called, Sid Vicious. And it was this sort of escalation of, we've come home again and Sid's got into trouble again.
He liked to fight. He couldn't have one. He couldn't fight sleep. But, but he gave that, out.
It's not that he was particularly aggressive, but he wouldn't take any nonsense from anyone. And someone said something stupid, he'd just tell them it's stupid. Actually, he got to the point where he'd take his belt off, wrap it around his hand, and just whack people with the butter. And I don't know where that came from, because he wasn't actually a physically aggressive guy.
So we're sitting in the speakeasy, and Paul Weller's coming in with his wife. Now, if Sid had just waited a second and asked me, I would have told him that Paul Weller can well look after himself. His dad, John, was an ex-boxer and all that. Sid's gone out like a lunatic with the boots flying. Paul Weller's cracked him a few punches, but he had a glass in his hand at the time, Paul, and it cut Sid on the face. There was a bit of screaming. I jumped in between them, and Sid's there. He's got the glass in his face, and Paul and his wife, I apologised to him, and they went off, and I said to Sid, why did you attack him like that? He said, because he said that we nicked in the city and took in holidays in the sun. I said, well, you did. One night I went round and saw Sid, and there was a cat that was in the flat, and for no reason he decided to put a noose around the cat and hang it up in front of me. And it didn't last long as far as ticks on the clock, but it seemed like an eternity. And the cat was struggling and trying to get away, but obviously it couldn't. It was whining. It was absolutely fighting to get away. And just before it passed away, it urinated and defecated right on his feet. And Sid was holding it in front of me. I utterly regret not stopping him doing that. Why he did that, I don't know. I have no idea. It's the most disgusting thing that I've ever seen in my life. And if I could have my life all over again, that is the biggest regret, that I would stop him from doing that.
It was horrible. And then finally put the cat in a plastic bag and took it to the bin downstairs. It was horrible.
He was always like that. He just took everything to the nth degree and he didn't care where it took him. And I guess he knew that one day the person he hit or the thing he did would be the end. He was willing to take it to the edge. He was willing to take it that far. I don't know why or where that came from, but he was like that always.
He was a guy that never saw a red light, as they say. Everything was always green. However dangerous. However dangerous. Do you feel if he'd never met you, he might be alive today? I don't know. What he might get run over by a car, I don't know.
But Sid, I suppose, would at the very best be called, could be called amoral. He just didn't really have a concept of what was good and what was bad. Certainly not for him, but for other people as well. Sid especially didn't know who himself was anyway, because he was too young.
I think the thing about Sid and his upbringing was he just wanted someone to love. You know, it seems to be fairly obvious. No father figure, moved around from pillar to post. Mum a bit of a bohemian, never settled. People like that tend to make a fool of themselves or, dress up strange, anything to get attention and be liked.
When I met Anne for the first time, it was almost like, that's the explanation.
Beverly couldn't look after herself, let alone look after Sid.
I never liked her. I mean, it was quite clear to me where his problems lay, and it was with her.
I always felt there was a bit of an agenda there. Well, that's kill me for thinking that, but I did.
What I know about Beverly, or what Sid told me, was, they used to go to Morocco, and then they would go back into Spain, and she used to sort of stuff blocks of hash down Sid's trousers. And, I mean, if you got caught in Spain at that time with even a joint, under Franco, you could go to prison for, 14 years. So it was pretty dangerous, but probably lucrative.
Yeah, if we went round to Sid's flat, like the high-rise where Anne lived, we could just do drugs in front of her whatever way we wanted.
I mean, Beverly was the type of person that, okay, if she arrived somewhere, it'd be like, oh, God, it's my mum, let's hide, hope she doesn't see us. So I don't think there was any particularly close bond there.
I remember when Sid and I went to see the Pistols at the Screen on the Green, and I had this little sort of vintage dress on that Sid had sort of cut really short and ripped up and made look fantastic. I mean, he was a great girly mate in many ways. And we watched the Pistols and we thought, we said to each other, what's the point? What's the point of carrying on? They say it all. They're everything we want to be. There's no point being in a band. We just felt like giving up at the end of that gig. It was such a fantastic show.
When did Sid become one of our #1 fans? I don't know that he did or not. I mean, I think he was just #1 hanging round after John. I think there was been a bit of a double act, and then John was busy doing something else and Sid wasn't. So, and there was nothing else going on in London at the time, so we was where the action was. So he'd come and cheer his mate on.
It is interesting to me that, John did bring Sid in to sort of like supposedly be his ally in the band, and of course, practically instantly you realise that he was going to overshadow John because of the way he looked, the way he was.
The lifestyles of people like Fleetwood Mac, the Eagles and Led Zeppelin were a million miles away from the street kid. So it needed to go back to the clubs, and I think that's why some scuzzy little boy like CBGB's was where you could create a brand new scene.
Dory Hamilton and his girl Sharon Honey O'Rourke, who ended up being my bass player, and Nancy, they were all friends.
There were different kind of groupies in the scene. There were groupies who just wanted to hang out with famous people, or were just kind of nice girls who you could have sex with or were like friendly. But then you had the Nancy type.
She wanted to marry a rock star and be a rock star's wife.
But usually girls like that hook up with a boyfriend pretty quickly. Nancy didn't have a boyfriend because no one could stand being with her for more than one evening. She was just really repulsive.
Nancy came on the scene, right? And like, she could have been 18, she might have been 20, I don't know, but fuck. She's like so old, And I just mean like,
she'd just seen too much. She'd seen so much.
The other people who were very onto the scene, like Gail Higgins and the bartenders at Max's and at CBGB's and things, all kind of said, stay away from her. She was a drug dealer and she was a prostitute and she was really bad news. And when someone is called really bad news, when you have Dee Dee Ramone's Connie going around breaking bottles over people's heads, that's really bad news.
Man, I mean, I thought she was like 27, you know? Anyway, and young, you know? I mean, I thought, oh, well, she was only 27, so there you go. I didn't even know. She was 20.
This woman had years of experience at manipulation, intimidation, you know, and, of course, she would fuck everybody as well, you know? God love her, you know? I mean, like, you know, if she couldn't get through, you should have sex. She asked me on numerous occasions.
It's how Nancy operated. She would go get the drugs so she could get laid.
And the first time I met Nancy, she was being shagged in the toilet by somebody. But not Sid, no. But someone very close to him.
Before the Heartbreakers and Nancy came over, at the Roxy in London, it was speed in the toilets upstairs and weed in the basement downstairs. And as I said before, with a bit of beer to wash it down.
You know, in those days, you could have had a wheelbarrow load of cocaine. Rock on, you were doing really well. You had that much heroin, the stigma that carried, you know, people were like, well, you know, didn't want to know.
It wasn't street, it was, you know, pseudo-glamorous.
New York infiltrated the London punk scene and brought one of the worst aspects of New York with it.
Why on earth people think this band, the Heartbreakers, Johnny Thunders and Jerry Nolan, who couldn't tie their shoes in the morning, could orchestrate the downfall of British youth by importing heroin into the British Isles is beyond me. And no one noticed Keith Moon and Keith Richards in and out of hospitals. They were English and they were stoned junkies, real stone junkies in England.
You know, I mean, to me, the Heartbreakers were like the best punk band. There was something about them, like this cocksure kind of arrogance. Good songs, looked great. And we watched them, like totally gobsmacked. And then they came down into the audience to say hello after they'd done their sort of 20 minutes. And I said to Jerry Nolan, I said, oh, I really like that song, Chinese Rock. What's that all about then? And he looked at me like I was an idiot. He said, well, heroin, boy. I went, oh, right. And it hadn't even come into anybody's really field of consciousness until then.
By the time the Heartbreakers and Nancy arrived, it was the new thing, you know, and they almost made it cool.
Johnny and Jerry needed to find someone they could hang out with. It's like English kid, first English kid, like, this guy's cool.
Now, it is in the nature, the unfortunate nature of a junkie to not want to be alone in their addiction.
I'm in their camp now, you know, I'm probably the first kid who did smack with these guys from New York, because they don't do spook.
There's no doubt that they turned a lot of people on to heroin.
And that really did have a major impact on the punk rock scene and almost kind of wiped out the first chapter of it.
And he was like rolling up his leg every now and again, and he was like showing everybody all his needle marks. He says, oh God, this foot has gone numb now. I can't use this foot anymore. And his whole body was absolutely covered with marks.
Sid developed his persona when he became a Pistol. I know the image and the requirements of living up to it did go to his head sometimes.
The name Sid Vicious was the most amazing creation in the world. It's like Hollywood stars, you know, Marilyn Monroe, Betty Grable, those people didn't know how to deal with who they suddenly had to be, and had to be all the time. They didn't get to only be it when the cameras were on, or only till someone said, you know, now you can go home now and just be yourself.
But this was exacerbated by drugs, which stoked, you know, his reasoning, innocence all went out the window, and he just became Sid Vicious.
Looking for a pretty dope fiend.
And
And I remember one day, she was at me and Honey O'Rourke's place at the Chelsea Hotel, and she says, wow, guys, you know, I'm going to London, man, because, you know, the Heartbreakers are going to be playing there.
Nancy turned up in London when she did because she had a thing for Jerry Nolan.
The story is with a guitar, but I don't know why she'd be giving Jerry a guitar, because he was a drummer.
Although he was a drummer, he had this really beautiful pink left-handed Fender Esquire with all the knobs on it were offset dice. He really flash kind of, not very punk, but he couldn't play it, but she brought it over for him. Hey, but he didn't want to, he knew she was bad news and just gave her the bum's rush.
I used to go back to Heartbreakers' flat quite a lot. Anyway, we walked in and there was just this incredibly loud woman there. Neil said, oh, it's my birthday, and she just started going on about her birthday. Everyone was just zonked out and smacked. And then we'd sort of turn the lights out and just sort of sitting down. And suddenly there's this presence in the room. It's Jerry Nolan. And, you know, fully clothed, mohair jumper, the whole lot. He got into bed beside me, so I was kind of stuck in the middle of Niels and Jerry, and he just said that he wasn't being weird or anything, but, you know, he was really, there's no way he was going to be on his own with Nancy on the loose.
She came up to me, Nancy came up and from behind put her hand on my shoulder and just said, hi, where's Jerry? First words out of her mouth. And I said, you will not see Jerry. I won't let you near Jerry. If I have to lock Jerry up in a room and not let him out of it, I won't let you near Jerry. Do you understand? And she just said, oh, okay, and wandered away. And that was it.
I think my first introduction to Nancy was hearing this neighing, whining sound from the background over my dub records I was playing, because she was loud.
See, Jerry very much used her. Jerry, there was, if someone could supply Jerry with drugs or with money or with a place to stay or a ride to the bar, they were his girlfriend.
And because obviously no one knew her and no one knew this story was a whole heap of lies, what it did is it opened a lot of doors for her. It got her into the McLaren Westwood empire. It got her into the speakeasy.
We'd go to the Roxy as a kind of watering hole. And there's this girl staggering about with a very loud voice. There were a couple of heartbreakers there, and they were avoiding her like the plague. She was going around asking everyone for a cigarette. And then she spotted Sid and made a beeline, and that was it. He started talking to her. She was all over him.
Well, we've never met American women before, and so initially it was quite a giggle.
Saw her on the arm of Sid, and I thought, oh my God, if there were ever a perfect target for Nancy Spungen.
Sid was very innocent, gullible, whatever you want to call it, naive, and she probably blew him off his feet.
What amazes me is that how over the years it's become a Romeo and Juliet story, and it's been kind of romanticized.
But he really loved this person. He loved her more than he loved his music.
Bit by bit, as he got together with Nancy, and then he became, you know, very caring and caught up in her world and trying to make her happy.
Whispering in his ear, she taught him things that no one had ever taught him, and she showed him a bit of love.
They were sensitive people, and they seemed to get along very well. In fact, they were always holding one another in my office, so you sort of sensed that there was a great affection between them.
And maybe they were right for each other. Maybe whatever it is she brought to the table, he needed.
Sid was really shy. I mean, he's really shy with girls. I never, ever saw him chat up a girl. I mean, a girl would have to come to Sid.
He wasn't interested in sex at all with a girl. They would throw themselves at him, and he wasn't interested at all.
He was quite possibly a virgin before he met Nancy.
He needed a strong, forward woman to, you know, to go to bed with him. Otherwise, he would never make the move, and she made the move.
She would really sort of like bolster his ego in a way that I thought was really what you're supposed to do if you're a boy and girlfriend.
I don't know if you saw any of the gigs, but Sid was like really shining out.
And I think if you had that in the background, then I don't think it was quite as tragic as we're all sort of being led to believe.
How many people loved the Beatles and hated Yoko automatically? It's like, because Yoko all of a sudden had power in the Beatles, and John, and she was, you know, controlling John. Well, maybe John wanted to be controlled. Maybe John needed her.
when someone's in love, what can you do, you know? If it's the bird or the band, usually the bird wins.
The Pistols came to America. They came to America, they came to tour.
By the time they announced their tour, I knew I had to find a way to get on that tour.
Spent a lot of time, Sid, when he went to America and he's on their tour with the Pistols, you know, he asked me and Barry to look out for Nancy. So we had the job of, like, making sure she was all right.
He was away with the Pistols in America, you know, he'd be ringing back, Viv, can you make sure you see Nancy? She says no one wants to talk to her, no one wants to speak to her, everyone hates her, it's breaking my heart. You know, he was still worried in the States because she'd be ringing up, giving him an earful all the time.
Because no one really wanted Nancy around. They tolerated Nancy because of Sid, and then she did get to that point where she was persona non grata around in most people's places.
We ended up setting up a party in Bob Gruen's room. And sure enough, everybody except for Johnny from the Pistols showed up. And Sid walked in, kind of in the middle of the party, with this tall, blonde woman. We're all kind of like, oh, that's good for Sid. He picked up the best-looking girl from the gig.
One time he called up and was telling her how he'd been a transvestite.
She had a very deep voice, and Sid was pretty upfront. He's like, well, here now, am I going to suck your cock or your cunt? And she said, cunt. And everybody's like, you know, what the? You know, that's a man's voice.
Sid, what are you doing over there, you know, on the road in America for the first time? You can only imagine. He was telling her about this transvestite he'd ended up with, and her reaction was, well, all right, Sid, as long as you're not doing any fucking any girls, you know. Which I thought was funny.
There were 3 or 4 real hardcore Pistols fans from LA, of which one is the famous Helen Keller.
And Sid came out, and he came right up to us. It was like, oh, look, people that I can talk to. He just like any kid, like anywhere that we would have run into. And he came running up, and he's like, hey, and he starts talking to us, and he's like, are you coming to the show? And I'm like, we've got tickets. And he grabbed the tickets out of my hand, and he grabbed us, and we went back, and he goes, give them their money back. They're on my guest list. And that was my initial meeting of Sid.
So she kind of became like Sid's companion on tour for that last US tour.
I remember in Dallas, he called her, and he was on the phone with her, and he's like, I met this girl, and it's really great. And I was like really terrified, because what I'd heard of Nancy and what I thought of Nancy and what everyone said was just what an incredible nightmare she was. And like, oh, she's gonna kill you if she ever finds out about you. And I was just like, why are you even mentioning that I exist to her? And it was kind of frightening to me, but he was like in love with her.
The Sex Pistols were fighting with each other. Malcolm was not speaking to Johnny. Johnny was not speaking to Malcolm. Nobody could find Sid. He was hanging out with some groupies, taking drugs.
We went in the bathroom, and he's like, oh, I'm going to do this. And I'm like, no, don't do it. And he's like, I'm going to do it. And I'm like, okay, there's nothing I can do. And sitting on the edge of the bathtub, Sid shot his heroin and fell directly back into the bathtub.
I've got the vision, Sid in the worst situation I'd ever seen him. And these kids just kind of looking at it on his bed, turning blue. I got him on his feet, walked him around, stuff I'd never had to do with anybody ever. He was responding, he was groaning, but he was in a semi-coma. His circulation returned. It was working, you know. I was really fearing it wouldn't.
And here's the beauty of Sid. The doctor shows up, gives him the Narcan, whatever it is they give you when you OD on heroin. Sid sits up, fixes his hair, stands up, and looks around and goes, what? And that was it. That was like nothing happened.
The Sex Pistols are finished. There could never be a replacement for John Rotten. Sometimes it upsets me so much that I cry about it, because that band stood for so much. It stood for so much, like freedom of youth and speech, and it was very revolutionary.
Well, I guess a junkie only needs a rap to justify his life and a means to get that rap. And once he was kicked out of the Pistols, he was kind of lost and up for absolutely anything. Porno, playing with anybody. I mean, they were just like desperate junkies. Really sad, it has to be said.
Hey, do you want to make a pornograph of me? Yeah. Give us £100.
I remember she came up to me and she said, "Hi, Steve. Would you like to watch me and Sid having sex for £20? I went, "You'd have to pay me a lot more than that, Nancy, I tell you." I said, because I couldn't think of nothing worse than watching you and him having sex.
I mean, she even hit on me one time and I actually gave her a spliff to get off my back. Not literally, folks.
There was also a rumour that Sid did as well, you know, that he gave himself to make the money.
Oh my God. Do you want me to make you a cup of coffee?
Yeah, could you?
Yes, I'll make you a cup of coffee.
I just took a suitcase, got on a plane, went to London, and I was on King's Road, and some kids came out, and they're like, "So, Sid's in the store right there, and boy, why don't you go in and say hi?" And I'm like, "Okay." And I walked in, and he turned around, and it was like we had just seen each other 5 minutes ago. And at that point, he's like, "You have to come over and meet Nancy." To be really honest, Nancy was so nice and wonderful to me when I met her. And then she goes, "You need to stay here with us if you're not really staying anywhere." They actually spent a lot of time in bed in their room in front of the TV in their underwear, high on fucking heroin. We would go to the chip shop, come back, watch TV, do our hair, you know. They stayed home a lot, you know. There wasn't a lot of fighting. There wasn't a lot of arguing. I think the whole time I was there was like one argument fight. There was kind of a lot of whining on Nancy's part, but I think she was just very whiny.
Girlfriend at the time used to make clothes, and she used to kind of hang out there, and Celia was always trying to let her jeans out a bit more because she was putting on weight and putting on weight and putting on weight, and this jeans sort of had these sort of different shade of blue V's in the back.
There was apparently animosity between Nancy and Sid's mom. And while I was living there, like a couple times they went out and they're like, "If she comes by, Nancy, if she comes by, don't let her in the house." And one night she did come by. She goes, "I just wanted to drop some things off for Sid." And she gave me a big bag of jujubes and a big bag of syringes. This was Mom's present, or whatever, care package to Sid. And I was just like,
Malcolm held the purse strings as regards money. So, and Sid needed money because he had a drug habit, so he was always dependent upon that. And Malcolm was never forthcoming with any great amounts of money.
Every time you go in there, it's meant to signify the flow of air around the show now.
He tried to be all artistic and impress us, and we were laughing our heads off, thinking, what an idiot. I hate Malcolm.
Yeah, obviously, Malcolm was really concentrating on Sid, and like Nancy was really getting in the way of Malcolm's plans.
What Nancy was doing was deciding that she was going to be Sid's manager.
So Malcolm did it as a word-of-mouth thing, which I thought was hilarious.
My girlfriend manages me. I just want to get another band together and tour.
The reality was, on paper and on contract and with the lawyers, Malcolm McLaren was still Sid's manager.
In retrospect, maybe there's a lot more humour to the whole thing than I was able to really enjoy at the time.
I don't know whether she'll manage Johnny Thunders. I don't know whether he'll have enough faith in her, but she's damn smart. Damn smart. She's been right around the music business since she was 13, and she knows a lot of guys, and she can pull a lot of weight.
And I was really surprised that Glenn and him were really good friends. When Glenn first came over, I was like, go figure. The one guy that, you know, he replaced in the band is the one guy who's like there for him.
Often I was sitting there in the pub next to him and he said, what's all this about we don't get on? I said, I don't know, we're sitting there in the pub, weren't we? He said, yeah. And he said, well, how can we prove to people? I said, I don't know if I'm bothered about proving to people. He said, no, we should. I said, well, how about doing a gig then? And he went, oh, that's a good idea, who can we get? And we went through who we could get, and we got Steve New Out the Rich Kids and Rat Scabies, just all mates, and put a band together, and we called it the Vicious White Kids, because Sid Vicious, I was still sort of just about in the Rich Kids, as Steve was, and Rat Scabies was actually not in the Damned at that stage. He had a band called the White Cat, so... But it was kind of funny doing that, because, I don't know, I just found Sid a little bit slow, really. He said, well, look, OK, we've got Steve on guitar and Rat on drums. Who's going to play bass? No, he said, you're a bass player and I'm a bass player. Who's going to play bass? I said, well, put it this way, Sid, I'm certainly not going to sing. He went, oh, well, who's going to sing then? I said, well, you can sing. Well, who's going to play bass?
That was the greatest show. Everyone was there. I think Debbie Harry was there, everyone was there. That was an amazing show. And had he been able to continue to pull that off when he got to New York, who knows what would have happened.
But there you go, when we started rehearsing, Sid, we did like one number and Sid come up to me afterwards, he said, wow, he said you can play bass all the way through a song without stopping.
At the time, it did enable a lot of kids who hadn't seen Sid Vicious on stage to actually go.
Into the rehearsal room for our first rehearsal, and everything had been cleared out by the band who had it before, apart from this Fender Mustang bass guitar, just sitting there. His eyes lit up and he went, I'm having that for my honey, you know, Nancy. And so we rehearsed and we drove home. Next day we go up to have a rehearsal and they said, well, OK, we'll have a good gig, take the equipment, but you can't take the equipment until you give us the bass back. What bass? The bass that Sid walked out with last night. No, we didn't have a bass. You know, like everybody's senior Sid, right? We put a phone call into Nancy and we arranged that, well, the bass was coming, you know, we could be loading up, but we had to sit there waiting for it to turn up. Of course, in the meantime, Nancy's painted it with black emulsion. Hadn't even taken the strings off or anything like that, and it arrives in a cab in a black laundrette bag. So we gave it to the guy, but it's still dripping wet, you know, but we just went.
But the whole idea of it was obviously to raise enough funds to send Sid over to New York and, you know.
Yeah, it could be a lot of things. It could be to get away from Malcolm, maybe to get some sort of control over his career himself, if he knew what he was doing. But I think there was also some legal problems they had over here at the time, too.
There was a young, fairly up-and-coming and promising record producer called John Shepcock, who again was only in his early 20s. And he was a heroin addict too. And he went round to Pin Dot Muse one night, and himself and Sid and Nancy had this kind of nod out on heroin. And what tells you about the state they were in is the next morning they woke up and genuinely did not know they were led next to the dead body of John Shepcock. And when Anne Beverly told me years later, she said, then they knew they had to go. Because the police were already harassing them for so many things, and now suddenly they're waking up with a dead body in their bed.
The way I remember that whole thing of Sid and Nancy hooking up and then her pretending to be his manager and going to New York, I have to say that things were moving so fast by that time that we didn't give a shit.
Things aren't getting easier at all, they're getting worse and worse. I hate this country and everything to do with it.
You know, the punk rock thing had taken off and had momentum, and no Sid, no Nancy or any of that stuff could really stop it. So we didn't really think twice about it.
I want to go and live somewhere else. Do you know what I mean? We have no plans whatsoever. We just live from day to day, you know, existentialist like Jean-Paul Sartre.
His entire, you know, roots in everything that he was obsessed with was in New York as well.
You know, it was cool. New York was cool. Let's go to New York. Oh, it sounds good. We can play Max's. We can make money. Yeah, okay, well, you know, launch our career from there.
His obsession with, you know, the New York Dolls and the whole New York punk rock and pre-punk rock scene between the two of them, where else were they? That's where they had to go.
They were so excited. They were like, we're going to America and we are going to just take over. As opposed to we're going to America and it's going to eat us.
Well, on the one hand, I think they came so she could show off and get back at everyone, because I don't think that many people liked her when she left.
New York reacted to the return of Nancy pretty much like you would expect.
She was like some, I guess, third-rate whatever chick from New York who never got paid any attention, and she came back.
It's almost like a high school thing,
This is all about her, you know what I mean? This was not about him. This was about her, for her, you know what I mean? And she was doing that thing, when you pull up to your high school reunion in a Rolls Royce, kind of, that's where she was at,
One year in England, she came back with Sid, and she had the thickest Cockney accent in the world, And it's like, the day before she had it, she had like this, I don't know, like a Philadelphia, she was a girl from Philadelphia. That kind of like defines Nancy.
It's almost like those Americans who come back with British accents, only she came back with a British boyfriend and British money and British fame, and all of which was wildly phony.
She was Nancy, she was running around. She was like Mrs. Sid Vicious.
And so, yes, everyone really despised her.
Sid Vicious was barely big on the underground in America. The Pistols hadn't actually sold any units. They'd already split up. It would be 10 years later before their album went platinum in America. So when he arrived, he would have been famous within his clique of people. I'm talking about a very basic underground fame.
People would throw shit at us in the streets, Sid Vicious was not a rock star, except among that circle of people.
As for the landmark Chelsea Hotel, it is more used to names like Dylan Thomas and Bob Dylan than that of Sid Vicious.
The Chelsea Hotel was a fancy, low-life nightmare with a hefty history.
But his mystique was that, so many artists from, Andy Warhol to Muhammad Ali, it was a place where the it people would be and you feel comfortable.
Dylan Thomas to Bob Dylan. All these brilliant artists were there at some period of time.
I first moved into the Chelsea in 1975, and I lived there on and off until 81.
You're allowed to do things you wouldn't be able to do at other hotels. You can take the bed apart. You can throw the bed out. You can put it in the hallway.
It was extremely dingy, dark place.
You can paint the walls each week a different color. Hang what you want on it, nail what you want up on it.
The rooms were anything but attractive.
How dingy your room was or how posh your room was up to you, not the hotel.
They were so available at the Chelsea Hotel. Everyone knew where they were, and everyone knew when they had drugs, and there was no screening at the front desk. People were just in and out.
And every drug dealer wanted to sell them something because, they've got money and they're famous.
The Chelsea Hotel, I think, was also kind of maybe not the greatest move for them, because you had a lot of characters now hanging out, Rockets Regular and these sleazy fuckers who just wanted to be sort of in there with Sid and obviously, wanting to rub shoulders with this icon,
So immediately they fell in with all the creeps, and maybe I should say us creeps, you know what I mean?
And there was this blonde there at the reception, kind of stumbling, surrounded by all these pound notes and U.S. notes on the floor. And the guy behind the reception looking really irritated, oh, God. And me and Honey O'Rourke went and said, oh, you know, you got money there, and it was Nancy. And she had like a big bruise on the side of her head. And she says, oh, wow, look what happened to me. We were at Johnny Rotten's place or something, and somebody OD'd or something, and she was hit with a bat or something. We had to leave. I'm like, oh, okay. Wow, you want to meet Sid?
We got him on the methadone program. It was one of the first things we did because he was not well. He came with a massive habit from London. The heroin in London was much stronger than it was in New York, so that was a problem. So that wasn't holding him. I mean, these are the problems you have when you travel.
I mean, when they arrived in America, we must remember there was a fairly substantial lump of money due to them from the cover of the song My Way. But of course, they were two fairly desperate heroin addicts. Waiting around for money was not particularly on the agenda on a daily basis. You had to have money readily available.
Sid and Jerry were good friends, and Jerry suggested they get a band, and so they did. It's going to be Sid, Jerry Nolan, and Arthur Kane from the Dolls, and Stephen Dior from Jerry's new group, The Idols. They were going to have Johnny Thunders play with them, but he wasn't really together enough, so eventually my brother played with them.
We finally decided we were going to do it. Nancy negotiates. Actually, Jerry Nolan negotiated the deal, actually. It was a good deal. Do 2 shows a night. We did a Thursday night, 2 shows, $6 in. I think the place held about, you could cram 2,000 in there upstairs.
I remember when she was booking things to have Sid playing Max's. I mean, she got a big advance, I think, from Tommy Dean, who was the new owner for Mickey Ruskin. So I think that's pretty good. Oh, she didn't have any power. Well, I couldn't go in there and say, okay, you know, give me all this money. You know, and they say, yeah, and I haven't even played a note. I mean, and not many people in the scene could do that.
It was a cool show, you know. He was happy at sound check and everything. You know, we're Steve Dior, we're all around, we're doing the sound check.
He was just a little too stoned by the time showtime rolled around.
It was very exciting and packed, and it sucked. You know, just like you would expect. It didn't suck. I mean, he was just so fucked up.
First night, he did get wasted, and I said, Sid, get stoned after the show, please. Do a good show, and let's all have a good time after, you know.
Things didn't go well at that show.
The crowd was a bit nasty at the moment.
Sid could barely stand up. He kind of picked up where he left off in San Francisco and was nodding out on stage.
It was a success because it was packed. There was lines around the block.
I know they were making quite good money doing the gigs. Like they could do Max's, and Sid himself would pocket probably about $3,000 or $4,000 easily.
I got good money for those shows.
And it was pocket money for Sid. It was pocket money for all those people. Anybody who played in that band, it was good money for.
24 Roger Delta. 423 live, look at the move.
Leading up to the death of Nancy, things on the New York Underground, and this could be because heroin was getting harder to find on a daily basis, did seem to get a lot more scuzzy. You know, the Dead Boys drummer was famously stabbed outside a taxi rank at 4 a.m. And a lot of the people on the underground were arming themselves. You know, it's quite well documented that people like Dee Ramone and Steve Bators weren't just buying knives, they were telling other people to buy knives, because there was obviously something going very wrong on the scuzzy side of Manhattan, if you like.
There shouldn't be too much doubt in anyone's mind that the tension between them was coming to a head.
Don't drop it on me again.
For anyone that wonders what might have happened on the 12th, I think that you need to start those shows.
You know, she'd gotten really kind of pushy, and a degree of arrogance, which was a disguise, I think, for insecurities that were going on with her and Sid in their relationship. I think mainly it was Nancy called up Honey O'Rourke, right? And says, oh, Sid and I are gonna come by. At the time, I don't know, it was before 12, several hours before 12. And they came to the room, and Nancy had a portfolio of like press clippings. And we ate. They were kind of depressed.
He's got some nasty habits.
And they started going through the pictures. And he's like, yeah, I remember that day, and now look at us. And look, you know, we're all fucked up. It wasn't even exactly feeling sorry for themselves. It was like worried and, wow, are we ever going to get the glory days back?
I mean, the one thing we need to understand about October the 12th, the night that Nancy died, there was no heroin about. And that's what leads us back to the Dilaudid and the Tuinol and various capsules and pills that were brought in for them by various people that night.
They left. And this is maybe around 12, close to it. And I went out.
You can imagine, you know, Sid and Nancy were clucking like chickens. They were coming down cold turkey, which is the worst way to come off drugs.
This is why they were having a party and buying a lot of drugs.
I had gotten there just after midnight. He called and said they were, you know, looking for something to relax with. And then I went with Kelly. I think Leon wanted to bring him to the room to get the brownie points, but Kelly insisted that I go with her.
Really loves to party. She never wants to leave.
It was just Sid there that I remember, Nancy. She gave us the money. We left.
Someone came over and told me there was a party at Sid's and asked me if I was going. I didn't really want to be there. You didn't know it was going to be an important night. It was just another night out in New York.
And around 2 or something, 3, I had a violent toothache and a stomachache.
Well, it was 19 years ago. But I know I don't go out before midnight, and I know Max's closes at 4, probably somewhere between 2 and 4.
So I went home, and then was seeking some type of medication, like a joint, right? And there was a dancer who lived on another floor, hanging out with a friend of mine, Pepe Valentine, and he was from a group called the Squirrels, and now he's Victor Colicchio, and a girl named Kelly Garrett. And I called her up and asked her, oh, do you have a joint? I got a toothache and stuff like that, and she came down.
Leon claims to have been in room with Kelly, unknown last name, resident of room 301, where he received a call from Nancy asking for pot at 4 a.m.
Nancy called me, wanted to know if I had a joint. She talked about Sid. I said, how was he? And she says, oh, he's done a couple of Dilaudid, and he's out of it, and he's useless. There was another voice in the background, and it wasn't Sid. I couldn't tell who it was, but there was somebody else in the room. And she says, okay, well, call if you hear about something. I said, yeah, of course, right.
It was, I'd say, between 4 and 5 that they called up. Kelly came down to the room. By the time I got dressed and got down to the room, we knocked on the door. She opened the door partially. Sid was out of it. And there was a guy in the room who I believe always is named to be, I would say, Snaky, Spidey, Skippy. I just remembered Sk and, you know, an E in the name. I didn't pay attention. And he was there, and they already had enough. And Sid was passed out, and that was the last time that I saw either one of them.
So I walked in, I scanned around the room. Sid was passed out on the bed, passed out.
Did he move at all while you were there?
No.
Never said anything?
Said anything? No. I knew I was familiar with his condition. He wasn't saying anything. He probably wasn't even dreaming. But someone said he ate about 30 Tuinols.
Basically, like Dilaudid is the kind of drug that's given to cancer patients to block out everything.
What are the likelihoods that someone who had eaten 30 Tuinols would get up in an hour, in a couple of hours, and...
There is no possibility.
Right.
There's none.
Everybody who was at that party told me how Sid was so stoned, he could not have lifted that knife, much less stabbed somebody with it.
Now, 30 Tuinol will, you know, boys and girls, will kill you. It's not the kind of experiment you want to try just to be like Sid Vicious. It will kill you. It would fell a tree.
Now, whether he ate 30 or whether he ate 3, I don't know. But I know that I knew people that could do 30 Tuinols, you know. I was one of them.
Because when I saw him, and I know the amount of Tuinols that he took, and I just can't see him killing her and going back to sleep, and there was just a lot of it didn't make sense.
I know for a fact there are people who went into that room that night that Nancy died. And when they told their stories years later, they said, talk about a shock when we woke up the next morning and Nancy was dead. When we left the Chelsea that night, we thought we were looking at the late Sid Vicious.
A while later, there's like a knocking on the door. No, pounding's more, you know, and it was so scary. And then there was a sound of, to me it sounded like metal hitting the floor, and some mumbling, and silence. Honey O'Rourke came back around 6 or something and said, oh, there's some blood outside the door.
The thing that really struck me, though, was why no one had ever talked to any of the people who were actually there. That there were so many people in the Chelsea, they're in that room that night, and that none of these people had seemed to have told anyone their story.
As a matter of fact, in the lobby of the Chelsea Hotel, the next morning when all the press and everybody was there were newspaper people all over the place, I did approach one detective, and I don't remember his name, but he wasn't interested at all in anything that I had to say. And the knife was left here on the suitcase?
This is interesting. I've got a better picture.
Yeah, look at that.
That's clean. No blood, no fingerprints, nothing.
Yeah, I can't see Sid wiping it. I can't see him placing it there.
And I think that the mitigating circumstances were such, as told to me by the lawyer that was representing him, if there were no fingerprints on this particular knife, then we would obviously have a very good case.
Sergeant Houseman, I think, looked into the whole thing a bit deeper. And he had suggested that had there been more time and more digging done, it's just possible there may have been a different outcome when the whole thing got to court. I know that the police wanted to speak to 6 people. They never told me the names of those people. But I know that in the police file, there is at least one page where 6 names have been wiped out.
These names, the fingerprints must have been on record. In order for my name to be on here, I would have to give the cops my fingerprint. So it would indicate to me that these people had previous criminal records. Otherwise, their fingerprints wouldn't be on file.
I just think it was one of those scenarios where if they'd had a little more time, they may have been to have done more with it.
Right after this thing happened, everybody in New York was suspicious because the stories came out that no money was found in the room. And people who had been at the party saw her flashing a lot of money around.
In the weeks leading up to Nancy's murder, Sid had played lucrative gigs at Max's Kansas City and finally been paid his royalties on the sales of My Way, paid in cash for both. Whatever else happened in room 100 that night, are we also supposed to believe that all this money simply vanished? Yet during the night, the room had been accessed by drug dealers, junkies, band members, and by NYPD.
The NYPD had no clue there was any missing money. It's only when various witnesses started giving their statements and talking about Nancy dropping $100 bills in the corridor of the Chelsea.
I remember following Nancy through the lobby, picking up her money because she was always dropping $100 bills behind her.
I felt like Nancy had lost some of her street smarts.
And picking those up, Nancy, put these away. This is, remember New York City?
The old Nancy, right, would have never been in a lobby of a hotel with thousands of pounds in New York. What? And we were like, put your money where you were doing. People to see that, that's nuts.
And, oh, fuck, yeah. I mean, she always had about $3,000 on her.
Yeah, some people might suspect the cops have taken it, but I would think it would have. I don't think it was a motive in the killing, but it was an opportunity.
Sid?
Yeah.
What did he tell you?
He told me that he saw the drawer where they kept their money was open, and it was missing. And then he went into the bathroom, and she was under the sink. And she was all bloody. Somebody came in the room, stabbed Nancy, took the money, and left. That seemed like a pretty normal story to me. That if If you knew Nancy, if she caught someone robbing money, she would attack.
There's talk of a party in the room. I can't see it as being much of a party because we know already that mine house was out cold before the night was too old.
There were people in and out of there.
There wasn't that many people hanging around and staying.
And I think they were the same people over and over again. We know that some people said that some drug dealer from the Chelsea Hotel had been in there at that time. Not Rocket's Red Glare, who was another self-seeking nutso. A wonderful person, by the way, but crazy.
I remember running into Rockets on Avenue A. I remember exactly where it was, just by 3rd Street. He'd sort of link arms with me and lean on me, and he was a tremendously big guy. Told me, I'm writing a book, and there's going to be some very interesting facts that are going to come out. And I kind of had a feeling I knew what he was heading, where he was going with this. And I let him go, and he's saying, I did it. And I didn't really have to say, what did you do, Rockets? He was talking about, the book, and he was going to let people know that he was the man.
There were rumors that it was Rocket's Red Glare, but as I said, he was the first one insisting it wasn't Sid, and I don't think someone who committed a murder would look to clear Sid. Also, he was Sid was Rocket's meal ticket at the time, and I don't think he would jeopardize. And he also liked the notoriety of hanging out with Sid.
So he definitely, when he knew the spotlight was on him, he would spin a tale or two.
I'm going, hello, I'm Kathleen Wirt. I'm making a movie about Sid Vicious. I'm proving he didn't kill Nancy. Hello, I'm Kathleen Wirt. I'm making a movie, And finally, I just said this offhand to this one girl, and she goes, oh my God, I know he didn't. She goes, that Michael guy was crazy.
We were having a meal before the gig, and this kid was sitting with Nancy, blonde-haired kid.
And I said, your boyfriend lived at the Chelsea in 1978? And she said, yeah. And I said, what, was he a junkie? And she goes, oh, yeah.
And I said to Sid, who is that? It's just like, oh, that's Michael. Nancy really likes him.
She said that he lived on the 6th floor and that there was a group of actors that lived up there that partied sometimes with Sid and Nancy and would go down to the 1st floor, and that he was a part of this group of people.
Drug dealer who was around, who I recall him since he may still be out there. And this guy was, he wore pointy alligator shoes and flamboyant, very gay.
We were kind of young, maybe cute, maybe Nancy was cute, I don't know what kind of relationship they had. Sid didn't really seem to mind at all, so I was like, okay. And apparently he was there the night that she was murdered.
One particular evening, I was hanging out with him. He said, I've got to go down to Sid and Nancy's room. I went in the room with him, and he did his business with them, and I remember that Nancy had a lot of money. I do remember Sid was very fucked up, and I was told it was too long. I was just making heavy rub into it. And so we left, and him split.
This kid was definitely, the police wanted to find this guy, very anxious to find this guy. I felt they found that they knew that this is the guy that did it, as far as I was concerned. I couldn't tell them a lot about this guy. It was another guy that just appeared on the scene all of a sudden.
Michael had come upstairs after this had happened sometime early in the morning.
Big smile on his face, and I'd never seen him smile before. And he said, guess what? Nancy's in a body bag. Sid killed her.
To everyone in the room, when he said that Sid had killed her, that no one believed him, and that he had shown up with all of this cash tied up with Nancy's purple hair tie. And they all identified this guy to the police, supposedly, which is why I always thought that if someone got a hold of the police files, that his name would be in there.
They closed the book, I think, because nothing ever came out about it, because nothing ever came out about this guy, Michael, and who he was. But I do have a drawing I did of this guy. I drew a picture of him from memory, because I've never seen it documented. But I did a sketch, what I believe this guy, what I remember him looking like. This is the guy that I think did it. Michael.
Every witness who visited Sid and Nancy on the night of Nancy's death claims that Sid was out cold on Tuinal for 7 hours. This is backed up by Bellevue Hospital records. There are fingerprints in the room of 6 people known to the NYPD, yet there is no police record of any of them ever being questioned. The murder weapon is wiped clean of blood and fingerprints. How did this happen? A large amount of money simply disappears overnight. How? Where to? Who is Michael? And why do so many people believe he was involved in the murder? In more than 30 years since Nancy's death, none of these questions have ever been satisfactorily answered.
I actually saw the Great Rock and Roll Swindle the other day, and it was funny watching Sid do My Way and Come On Everybody. You realise that, you know, he was and could have been a really great frontman, but hey, it wasn't to be.
You know, he had a fantastic look, don't forget. He had the best image out of all the punks at the time. You know, he's still an icon.
The fact that 30 years later, I could still sort of go into a comic shop and still see him and buy a doll of it, it just is quite extraordinary.
I recently had a recklessly extravagant time in New York, and I went to the CBGB's as was, and there was a Bob Gruen exhibition there. And Sid figures prominently throughout it all as being the face of punk.
But if he didn't die, I dare say he could have been playing Vegas, you know, nightly. Running through, you know, the old rock and roll numbers, a few Sex Pistols numbers, and a couple of Sinatras.
It's always the same, isn't it? If you die that young, that tragically, in such a sensational spotlight like that, you're almost sort of like in amber. It's happened to so many people. You can see it all, from James Dean, Marilyn Monroe onwards.
I've never met anybody like him. I probably never will meet anybody like him again. One unique character.